Hi, and welcome back to the Contemporary Old West channel with BF Biles. If you enjoy my channel, I hope you'll take a moment to like and subscribe. I would be grateful for your support. In today's episode, you'll hear Chapter 6 of my novel, Hunting Charm. And on today's plate of history beans, we'll talk about the domino game in the Old West. In today's chapter, the central characters in my novel play the game of 88, or as it's sometimes called, Texas 88. The game has been around since the 19th century and was at least as popular as any of the poker games one might find during that time period. As a quick recap of Hunting Charm thus far, let me first encourage you to listen to chapters 1 through 5. If you wish to forge ahead, though, I'll try to quickly summarize what's happened thus far. In the story, a young woman, Doreen Tarwater, leaves her home in 1870s Wichita, Kansas, by stowing away in the back of a tarp-covered buckboard wagon owned by a black mule rancher who lives in the central part of Oklahoma. Doreen's father, Theo Tarwater, who owns the local stockyards during the time when Wichita was booming thanks to newly built railroads, isn't certain where his daughter's gone to, but after a bit of investigation, sends a pair of obese pinriders after the wagon owned by the black mule rancher, Cecil Johnson. The story follows two timelines. One timeline follows Doreen and Cecil Johnson and his man Mr. Sugars, and the two men sent to follow Doreen, Bucky and Bart Baylor. The second timeline starts about 6 weeks later when Theo Tarwater hires a pair of cowboy detectives to find out what happened to Doreen, who he now believes is dead. In Chapter 5, we learn how Theo Tarwater sent Bucky and Bart Baylor after his daughter. We don't know the details of their journey yet, but those details will be coming in later chapters. Chapter 6, we turn once again to a few weeks later when Matt and Bart arrive home near an uncharted town named Ulysses in southwest Kansas. Brent, who Matt has rescued from the deprivations of alcoholism in Chapter 2, is reunited with his mother. She scolds her wayward son, but then tells him they have a party planned for that night. Here's Chapter 6 of Hunting Charm, a mention of sixes. Chapter 6, a mention of threes. "If you weren't grown, I'd whip the tar out of you, boy." Brant's mother, a smallish woman with a fiery temper, often threatened dire harm, but had never struck her son with even a switch. "I'm sorry, Mama." Brant bowed his head. "I just got low down over Patsy because she said we were gonna marry, then took off without a word. I lost track of myself." "You and your daddy spent half your lives losing track of yourselves. It was liquor killed your daddy, and I don't aim to see it kill you too. Thank our good Lord for Matt." Millie Tucker reached over and gave Matt a tight and affectionate hug. "I wish my boy could be more like you." "Thank you, ma'am." "Gosh, Mommy, you ain't even said you were glad to see me, and here you are hugging him like he was your own kin, and I ain't nothing." "Shut up, you're whining. I give hugs to those that deserve hugs, and I give whippings to those that deserve whippings. You should be happy I don't pull out your daddy's old razor strap and tan your butt." "I made a mistake." "And I don't have to approve of it. You're my boy, and you ain't acting like a man. Drinking and crying like a little girl. I hear you were as dirty as a pig. Isn't that so, Matt?" "Well, ma'am, I reckon he was a bit dirtier than most pigs, though I reckon comparisons might not be fair." "Matt, you ain't got no call to speak like that," Brant said. "I wasn't near as dirty as a pig." "You hush up, boy," Millie snapped. "If Matt says you were dirtier than a pig, I'm inclined to believe him. Fact is, you weren't never fond of bathing." "Oh, Mama." "Your papa liked to have a drink, but he didn't ever shirk on his work, and he never failed to take himself a bath every week. A man who drinks is one thing, but a total no-count drunk is another. You've behaved shamefully, and I ain't about to let you forget it." Millie Tucker stood for a moment glaring at her son. Then her expression softened. "I guess you boys are hungry. I have beans and cornbread in the kitchen and a quarter beef smoking out by the barn. We plan to have a few folks over, Hunter, even though you did act like a fool. Your stepdaddy says we will celebrate the return of the prodigal son. Fred likes to get together, and I reckon I do too. We'll have fiddle playing and dancing and play some dominoes." "That sounds good, Mama," Brent said, sniffing and blinking. "Come over here, boy." Millie gave her son a tight hug and pinched his cheek. "You got to put that gal out of your mind and get on with things." "No, Mama." That evening, lanterns shone brightly around the ranch house, illuminating a yard filled with neighbors. Old man Hawkins on fiddle and his son Will on guitar harmonized in high tenor voices about Sweet Betsy from Pike and old Susanna. Matt danced with every woman in the county, single and married, while Brent slipped off for a few sips of whiskey behind the barn with his toothless stepfather, Fred Tucker. The sour mash tasted good, but Matt, thinking of his mother's humiliating words from earlier, declined a third nip. "So what you boys have planned?" Fred asked. "Matt's got some business lined up finding a colored man who killed a white gal. That's what I got from it so far." "Your daddy taught you how to use pistols like a professional gunfighter. I reckon it would be a waste of talent if you were to just put them aside and start farming." "I reckon. Still, seems like dangerous business, rounding up murderous kidnappers and renegade Comanche and such." "Yes, sir, can be." "You reckon you'll ever get into another line of work?" "We were thinking on joining up with the Texas Rangers, but Matt says they have to follow too many orders. He says we can make more money with me doing the shooting and him doing the thinking." "Well, I reckon it's been working for you so far." "Yes, sir, we've been doing okay, though it ain't perfect. Gets tiresome riding all day, and Matt ain't as easy to get on with as you might think." "You two ever figure you could end up on the wrong side of the law, hiring out as gunslingers or some such?" "Matt says we ain't gunslingers. He says we're more like a western version of them investigators out of Scotland Yard. Matt's got a right smart mind when it comes to working out details on how things happened. He read up on it." "Yeah, plus there's them books read about you two fellers. I read that story about how Matt figured out where those Indians took them McGregor girls. That how it really happened?" "Pretty much. The writer dressed it up a little, but Matt's a smart one." Brent looked at the distant half moon and glittering stars and thought of Patsy. He resisted the urge to take another nip from Fred's jar. Matt would never understand why Patsy's decision to leave had struck him down. At that moment, his handsome partner was dancing or talking to the prettiest young woman at the party. Brent, meanwhile, stood behind the barn with his stepfather, feeling guilty about taking a couple of sips from a jar of moonshine. As he sometimes did, Brent asked himself why Matt seemed so at ease around others while he felt like an outsider. "Matt's a right fine feller," Fred sipped once again. "Course, he ain't skilled with a pistol or much help in a scrap." "He does all right. I hear tell how you killed 10 Indians with a rifle, then run off another 10 with your bare fist whilst you were saving them gals. Weren't but 6 Indians all put together. Hell, killing 5 Indians is like killing 10 or 20 regular men. Indians is slippery as hell. Fred reached out and placed a kind hand on Brant's shoulder. If I was in a scrap, I'd take you any day over Matt. Brant took a deep breath and smiled despite himself. His mother had met a good man in Fred Tucker, despite the man's shortage of teeth and crazy eye that gazed permanently to the right. Fred kept his mother safe. Thank you, he mumbled, then added, I didn't kill but 3 of them dog soldiers. The other 3 ran off before I could get another shot. Fred offered the bottle again. Brant regarded it for a long moment, then nodded. I ain't gonna drink no more. Leastwise not at Mama's house. Lanterns were refueled, and the shuffle of dominoes on linen added a rhythmic clicking to the guitar and fiddle. Young folks slipped away to watch the stars and steal a kiss beneath an elm, while the older folks seated themselves for the games. Brant found himself with his mother, a local farm wife named Minnie Plinko, and Minnie's daughter, Ruth, a pretty girl with long brown hair and a well-fitted dress Brant had difficulty ignoring. I'll just barely mention them 6s. Minnie scrutinized her dominoes. The game, 88, starts with players bidding on the number of points they feel they might catch. Minnie had placed a bid of 54, the minimum. Don't you just pass over there, boy. Find something to bid on. Millie Brantley encouraged her son to mention something from his hand. I ain't got nothing to bid on except maybe some 3s. Brant knew he probably shouldn't bid at all. Are you bidding or talking? Minnie Plinko glared at Matt. Polite play doesn't include telling your partner what is in your hand. Well, I ain't got nothing then. Minnie sniffed and looked at her daughter. Ruth, do you have a bid, or would you prefer to allow Millie's bid to stand? No, Mama, I ain't gonna bid. Ruth Plinko looked up, smiling at Hunter, then lowering her head. Ruth's glance completely befuddled Hunter Brantley. He stole another peek at her tightly wrapped upper torso and shifted uncomfortably, wondering if there would be an opportunity to ask for a dance. Maybe he thought they could even take a trip behind the barn to gaze at the stars. Distracted, he failed to notice that his mother took the bid in the suit of 6s, but led with a double 3, the equivalent of an ace in an offsuit in bridge. When his turn to play came, he carelessly tossed out a 3-6, another high domino, and because of the 6, a trump. It was a domino he should have saved to catch a later trick. Is that the only 3 you got in your hand, boy? Millie asked. You've been sipping off whiskey behind that barn, ain't you? Hold up there, I accidentally threw out the wrong domino. Brant reached out. Stop! Minnie tapped Brant's hand. You made your play. Boy, you got about as much sense as a mule. You lose this hand for us because of your drinking, and I'm going to pull out your daddy's razor strap. I'm tired of this foolishness. Mama didn't have but 2 sips, and that was over an hour ago. Hunter blushed, thoughts of a dance with Ruth Plinko evaporating. Some folks can have 2 sips and not act like a fool, but you ain't one such. Millie's voice dripped with scorn. I ain't gonna watch another man in this family drink himself into utter stupidity. A strange thing happened at that moment. Millie, who seemed ready to launch into an angry tirade, paused. Then her expression changed abruptly to one of remorse. I ain't gonna watch another man stumble out of bed in the morning, drink himself whiskey just so he can stop shaking, then fall dead 2 hours later in the hot sun. I ain't gonna watch another child die because I can't afford no medicine because it all got poured down the gut of a stinking drunk." Millie rose from her seat and, despite her small stature, towered over Brant. Voices at the party quieted. "You got to leave the whiskey behind, boy. Your poor mama can't bear it no more. I can't watch another member of my family die. You're all that's left to me." Then, with surprising alacrity, Millie Brantley, with all her strength, slapped Brant across the cheek. The guitar playing and domino dealing came to a clicking, string-jangling halt. "Stop acting like a fool," Millie shouted. With that, her shoulders sagged. She turned and walked ceremoniously up the steps and entered the house, slamming the door behind her. Hunter sat in stunned silence as the entire assemblage turned in his direction. "Best settle this right now." Minnie Plinko spoke loudly so that everyone heard. There were several yips and mm-hms. Everyone knew about Dodge City, about Patsy, and sympathized with his long-suffering mother. An unidentified man's voice said, "You need to go comfort your poor mama, Hunter." Another drawled, "Go tell your ma you're sorry, boy." Brant, mortified, rose slowly to his feet. The eyes of neighbors, some of them close friends, others he barely knew, drilled into him. He shifted from one foot to the other, searching for words. From the shadows near the south corner of the ranch house, Matt Grayson appeared and strolled casually to Brant's side. The handsome cowboy's sudden appearance drew everyone's attention. "Brant, you go on in and speak with your mama." Matt pushed him up the steps. "I'll be in shortly, and we'll talk about getting our things together. We need to hit the trail here in a day or two." Then Matt turned to address the crowd. "I'm certain Mrs. Brantley would thank you all for coming tonight. This situation reminds me of a story my grandpa used to tell. In case y'all don't know, my family came from Germany over 50 years ago. There was another family that come along with ours, and I reckon as how my grandpa took a liking to one of their gals. The boat ride was rough, but they were sturdy folks, and my grandparents, youngsters at the time, may have added a little rocking to the boat, if you know what I'm saying." Matt paused as the party guests chuckled. Hunter tuned out Matt's speech. He had heard the story before. As he slithered into the house, the group chuckled again. Brant felt profoundly sad. He desperately wanted to join Fred Tucker near the barn for a few more sips from the whiskey jar. Instead, he walked slowly to his mother's bedroom door. She had suffered from his father's drinking. Brant had seen it happen 100 times or more, especially when his brother had died of pleurisy. Now he seemed destined to repeat his father's mistakes. Brant started to knock, but changed his mind. He seated himself at the kitchen table. His mother was right to be upset. He recalled the day he found his father's body, cold and pale, a few feet from the plow. He was 14 at the time. From outside, the clicking of dominoes resumed, accompanied by laughter, conversation, and the high-pitched strains of a melody played on fiddle. He stood a second time and went to his mother's doorway, but stopped again. He wanted to offer an apology, to swear he would never touch another drink, but he recalled the dozens of times he had heard the same promise from his father. He wouldn't make a promise he couldn't keep. Despite the crowd's advice that he should comfort his poor mama, Brant knew he should wait. His mother would be out of sorts the next morning, but she would forgive him. Millie Brantley had plenty of practice when it came to forgiving a drunk. He returned to the kitchen chair, listening to the fiddle and thinking about a dance with Ruth Plinko. There would be no romance tonight. He sat there for the next hour until the music and clicking of dominoes faded and the voices dwindled to nearly inaudible goodbyes. His mother emerged but didn't speak as she passed. He heard more faint conversation. One or two of the ladies helping with cleanup entered, placed an item onto a shelf, or gathered a cloth for wiping. None of them glanced in his direction. He considered going back outside to help, but felt he would be unwelcome. The desire for whiskey clawed at his gut. A faint knock sounded. The door cracked open, and Matt's head appeared. "Come on in." Matt, silent, gathered a cup from the counter and poured coffee from the pot Brant's mother always kept atop the wood burner. "That brew ain't hot, and it's been setting there most all day." "Don't matter. I like it cold and strong. Goes down easier." "Wouldn't take 15 minutes to warm it. There's coals in the bottom of the stove." "It's too warm. No need to get the house all heated up." "Suit yourself." "Maybe we should just hit the trail tomorrow," Matt said after a long pause. "Ain't nothing keeping us on here, and that business with the white gal ain't getting any warmer. I reckon we can get ourselves a few cans of beans and some bacon and such." Brent nodded. "I'm good with coffee beans and bacon." "Well, that's what we're about to be eating 2 or 3 times a day," Matt said. "Yep." Matt scrutinized Brant, examining his slumped posture and poorly chopped hair. He wanted to say something to lighten the mood, but couldn't think of anything. "We'll pick up supplies and maybe get a haircut. Nothing makes a feller feel better than to have a nice shave and haircut." "I like my hair just as it is." "Well, sir, I'll get a haircut, and then we'll go. Don't matter none. It ain't likely we'll be running into any gals on the trail. We sure as hell won't be seeing Ruth Plinko. I think she was taking a little shine to you there at the domino table." "What do you mean, she was taking a shine to me?" "Don't joke around with me, Matt. I'm not in the mood." "I noticed her smiling in your direction is all. No need to get your lasso all tangled." "Gals don't like me, and that's a fact." Brant slumped. "Hell, I could get 10 haircuts and have a bath twice a week, and gals wouldn't pay me no mind. I'm just an ugly Gus, and ain't nothing to be done about it except maybe learn to live with the notion that I'm At that point, Brant choked up and couldn't say another word. Matt stifled the urge to chuckle and said, "It ain't as bad as all that. Hell, Brant, plenty of gals would be pleased to go courting with a fellow as big and strong as you. Maybe he ain't no precious flower, but that ain't what gals like anyway. Shoot, this is plumb ridiculous. Every time I tell a gal how I feel, I get, how do you know a damn thing about it anyway? You ain't never had a gal say no." "I had plenty say no." "When did a gal ever say no to you?" "That gal in Abilene said no about 20 times. Of course, she said yes the 21st time. Sometimes you gotta keep asking." "See, you ain't got no idea what I'm even talking about." "I reckon if you were to ask Ruth Plinko to go for a picnic, she would likely say yes. I ain't sure because you're a little shaggy, but if you got that hair chopped and presented yourself in a civilized way, I imagine she'd be proud to sit down with you. She might even give you a little smooch." "I don't think so." "Why not? All she can say is no. I swear to Jesus, Brant, for a fellow that can face down a pack of screaming outlaws, you gotta be one of the most scaredy-catted fellers I know when it comes to gals." "An outlaw ain't so scary as a gal. Why ain't you anxious around gals, Matt?" "I reckon I do get a little nervous, but that just adds to the excitement. Brant, you just need a little confidence. Think about old Fred Tucker. He ain't got but 2 teeth and that weird eye looking over at the wall. The man's so ugly he's kind of, I don't know, lovable. I like old Fred, and so does your mama. You understand? It's about what's inside, Hunter, and I know you, brother. What's inside is good. Like I said, with a little barber in and a couple of pairs of clean pants, you're likely to have all the gals you need. How many gals do you need? Well, now, Matt paused, then said, based on past endeavors, more than one can be risky, so I reckon just one. Despite himself, Brent smiled. On today's Plate of History Beans, we'll take a look at the game of dominoes. Dominoes have sometimes been overlooked as a part of the Old West, but I assure you they were there. Dominoes have been around for centuries. Games using numbered tiles carved from ivory or jade were first played in China in the 12th century, and evidence exists that the ancient Egyptians played games using numbered tiles carved from wood or bone going back to the 5th century BC. In today's chapter, I have the characters playing a game called 88, or as it's sometimes called, Texas 88. 88 is a game for 6 players using 2 sets of dominoes. You may notice in the book the game only has 4 players. I can only say that as a boy I grew up playing with my grandparents a game they called 88 with only 4 players and a higher number of tricks than standard 88. So that's the game being played in the story of. Dominoes were popularized in Europe and the US in the 18th century. It's a certainty that almost anyone you happen to meet in the Old West was familiar with games like all fives, muggins, blocks, 42, 84, and of course 88. Dominoes in the Old West were almost always made from wood, but you could find sets carved from ivory or stone, like jade or quartz. Some sources contend that dominoes were regarded as more of a family game, one the ladies could play without the stigma attached to many card games popular at the time, such as poker or faro. So, at parties attended by families, like the one depicted in Hunting Charm, it's likely that one might find folks playing dominoes or card games such as hearts or cribbage. The domino game, all fives, or its variant, all fives and threes, is similar to cribbage in that score is kept using pips or pegs. While dominoes may have been regarded as slightly more respectable, if one visited a saloon in the Old West, one was just as likely to find men gambling at dominoes as they would at poker or faro. There are even a few movies out there that depict gamblers playing domino, including the classic Domino Kid, starring serial Western film star Rory Calhoun. If you're a fan of Western movies, you might check out some of Calhoun's pictures. They are pretty cheesy, but heavy on the shoot-'em-up stuff. If you like pulp movies, Calhoun is your man. That's it for today's chapter and Plate of History Beans. I hope you'll join me next week for Chapter 7, and don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons. Thanks again for tuning in to the Contemporary Old West channel with B.F. Biles.